And now to finish this project, let's finish the Stripe integration with webhooks. And so let's start to remember how our Stripe integration actually works right now. So we have this checkout session endpoint, which gets called from our front end. And this will then call the get checkout session function. So basically this one here, which will create a checkout session on the server using all of this information here, and then send it back to the client. Then, after the processing of the payment is successfully done by Stripe, then redirect the user to this success URL. So this one that we created, all right? And so remember that onto this URL, we added the tour ID, the user ID, and also the price. And we did that so that once this URL here is then called, our application would create a new booking document in our database. So how did that work? So in the My Tours route, we have a middleware for that. So remember here in the view routes in My Tours, we have this create booking checkout, right? And so that's this function here, which basically from the query takes the tour, user, and price and creates a new entry in the database using that data, okay? So basically we put this data on the URL whenever Stripe successfully processes a payment. And then this middleware function that we have here picks up that data and creates a new booking in our system using that data. And then after that, we basically redirect here onto the original URL without the query string, okay? Now the problem with this was that it's not really secure. So everyone who knows this URL structure, so this one up here with tour, user, and price in the query string, can basically create a booking in our system without actually paying, right? So all they would have to do is to open up this URL with some data in there, and then from there automatically create a booking without going through the Stripe process, all right? And so remember how back then I said that we would fix this using something called webhooks, okay? So we do that now because for that we actually need our website to be deployed. And now at this point, that's actually the case. And so now we can implement these webhooks. All right. So for that, let's go to our Stripe dashboard. And I actually already have that open here. And then go here to developers, then choose webhooks, and here add a new endpoint. Now, what is this endpoint here and this webhook? Well, basically, we're going to specify a URL here to which Stripe will automatically send a post request to whenever a checkout session has successfully completed. So basically, whenever a payment was successful, okay? And with that post request, Stripe will then send back the original session data that we created in the first step when we created that checkout session, okay? And so that's the reason why we actually needed our website to be deployed here, because now we need to specify that real life URL here. So let's grab that from here and then add our route here basically. And I'm going to call this one webhook checkout, okay? So it's not in the API and it's not inside the bookings, and you will see in a moment why that is, okay? So again, when a payment was successful, Stripe will then automatically post the original session data to this URL. All right. Now we also need to select the event, and you see there are tons of events that we could use here. And the one that we're using is the checkout session completed. Okay. So add that. Now you need to put in your password here again. And then there we go. This webhook then also has a secret here. Okay. And this one we will then also need in a second when we actually create a route for this URL here. And actually that's exactly what we're going to do next. All right. So basically in our system, of course, we now need a route for this here. Okay. So that when Stripe then posts the data to our application, we can then actually do something with it. All right. So let's go back here and open up our application. Okay. And so we will actually add this route right here. And again, I will explain you why in a second. So app.post, and then the route. And then of course we need a handler function for that. And so let's quickly create it here in our booking controller. And so let me call that exports.webhook checkout. All right. And now I will have to import this controller into app.js. And so let's do that right here after the booking router actually. So this one and this one. Controller, and here also controller. All right. And now down here, that's booking controller dot webhook checkout. Now, why do we actually define this webhook checkout right here in app.js instead of doing it, for example, in the booking router? Well, the reason for that is that in this handler function, when we receive the body from Stripe, the Stripe function that we're then going to use to actually read the body needs this body in a raw form. So basically as a stream and not as JSON. Okay? So again, in this route here, we need the body coming with the request to be not in JSON. All right? Otherwise, this is not going to be working at all. Now, the thing is that as soon as our request hits this middleware here, the body will be parsed and converted to JSON, right? And it will then be put on request.body as a simple JSON object. And again, with that, this route handler here would then not work. And so that's the whole reason why we need to put this route here before we call the body parser, right? Now, we still need to actually parse the body, but in a so-called raw format. And by the time I was recording this video, we could not do it with Express out of the box. And so in this video, we download the body parser from NPM and use it as I show it in the video. However, like 5 days after I recorded this video, Express added the raw parser to Express as well. And so now we can use express.raw instead of having to install the body parser middleware from NPM. So again, in this video, I will now install the body parser, but you don't really need to. You can just use express.raw instead. So npm install body parser. And this probably all sounds a little bit confusing, and I totally understand that, but that's just how the Stripe documentation works and forces us to do it really. All right. So let's go back here to our route. And in this route, we need the body to be in a raw format. And so we can add that as a middleware here between the route and the final handler. So here we say body parser dot raw. And we also need to specify here the type, just very quick, as application JSON. Okay, and so we now added this body parsing as a raw body here in this middleware stack. All right, and all this will really start to come together once we start implementing this function. And actually, let's do that now. So right here. But before we actually do that, let's get rid of all the code that we wrote in order to make it work right now. So basically, this middleware function, we don't need it anymore. Also here in the view routes, we don't need it here anymore either. And then finally, in the booking controller, let's also set our URL back to normal. Okay, and I will just leave all of this here so that you can keep it as a reference. Okay, but now the success URL should actually just be this. So basically, after a successful booking, we still want to come back to my tours, but without all these query parameters. Okay, because now it's no longer this function here, which will take care of creating the booking, but instead it is this function here, which is of course the one that gets called once Stripe calls our webhook. Okay? So let's now implement this, and the first thing that we need to do is to read the Stripe signature out of our headers. So signature, and then request.headers, and then from there Stripe signature. Okay, so basically when Stripe calls our webhook, it will add a header to that request containing a special signature for our webhook. Okay, and if you're thinking that you're just blindly following what I'm doing here, well, that's actually exactly what I did as well from the Stripe documentations. So again, this is really just how Stripe works, and there's nothing we can do against that. Okay. Anyway, next up, let's create a Stripe event. So const event equals Stripe. And for that, of course, we need to have the Stripe library installed, which we have up here, right? So stripe.webhooks.construct event. And now here is where finally that body comes into play. So request.body, and remember that this body here needs to be in the raw form. So basically available as a stream. And so once more, that is why we put that route before all our other routes, and especially before the body parser could do its job of converting our body into a JSON object. Okay? Then besides that body, for the event, we need a signature. So basically the signature that was sent along with a header, and then finally our webhook secret. So let's get that from here, copy it, and since it's a secret, we should, as always, add it here to our config file. So Stripe webhook secret. And then later, of course, don't forget to also add this to our Heroku configuration. Okay. So let's now use that at process.env, and I should have just copied that right here. Okay. And so you see, all of this is really to make the process super secure. So we need all of this data, like the signature and also the secret, in order to basically validate the data that comes in the body, so that no one can actually manipulate that. All right. Now, during the creation of this event, there might be some errors. For example, if the signature is wrong or if the secret is wrong. And so let's wrap this into a try catch block. Okay. Of course, we now need to catch. And so in case there is an error, we want to send back an error to Stripe. Okay. So return res.status 400, and then just use send webhook error, and then let's just send the error dot message. Okay. So it is Stripe who will receive this response here, because again, it is Stripe who will actually call the URL, so our webhook, which will then call this function. Okay. Now we need to, of course, also declare this event here outside of the try catch block, because otherwise we will not be able to use it down there. So let event, and then reassign it down here. Because remember that the ES6 const and let are block scoped. And so this variable would not be available outside of this block. Okay. And so now let's actually use that event. And first off, we need to test if this really is the event that we want. So we can do event.type is equal to checkout.session.complete. And so remember that in our Stripe dashboard, that's exactly the type that we defined here. So that's the event type. And so now we're checking if that is really the event that we are receiving here. So just to be 100% sure. And so if it is, we then want to actually use the event to create our booking in our database. All right? And so actually let's do that in a separate function and not inside here of all of this mess, okay? And so for that, I will create a function, and actually let me give it this exact same name. So create booking checkout was actually a nice name, but now it cannot be a middleware, but instead just a regular function. All right, and this function will accept the session data. And remember that this session data is exactly this session that we created here in the first place, okay? So if this is the correct event, then let's actually call that function. So create booking checkout with the session, which is at event.data.object. Okay, and then finally, let's just send back some response to Stripe. Okay, so status 200, and then let's say some JSON received set to true. Okay, makes sense? So once more, all of this code here will run whenever a payment was successful. And so Stripe will then call our webhook, which is the URL which is going to call this function. And so this function receives a body from the request, and then together with the signature and our webhook secret, creates an event which will contain a session, and then using that session data, we can create our new booking in the database. Okay, and so that will actually be pretty similar to what we had here before. So we will need this line of code here again. And so this will also be an async function. And so this is exactly the same. Now what we need here, of course, is to get access to the tour, user, and price. But that data, once more, is stored in that session. So let's start with the tour. And remember how up here, when we first created this handler function, I specified this client reference ID field and added the tour ID to that. Remember that? And so I did that because at the time I already knew that we would need this tour ID a bit later. And so now it's that time where we actually need the tour ID in order to be able to create that new booking. Okay? And so now the tour ID that we need is at session.clients reference ID. So let's copy this and say session. And of course here we need to say tour. All right? So that's the tour ID. Next up, we need the user ID. Now the information that we have in our session about the user is the user's email. Okay? And so now what we need to do is to basically get the user's ID. And for that, we will query by the email. And that's no problem because the email is also unique. And so based on that, we can then find the unique ID. So const user is await. And I think we already have the user here. No, actually not. So let's just do that here. And user here as well. Okay, so user.find1 and then query by the email, which is in session dot, and I believe that's client email or something, or it's customer email. Okay, but that will then return the entire document, but we want actually the ID. So let's wrap all of this here in parentheses and then call the ID on there, or actually read the ID. Okay, so that's it. And finally the price. So where is the price stored? Well, it's here in line items, and then that's an array. So at element 0, and then the amount divided by 100. Okay, so we multiplied it here by 100 to get cents, but now of course we want it back in dollars. So we need to basically divide that back. And so session dot line items, and then the first element dot amount, if I'm right Yeah, so amount divided by 100. And that should actually be it. So let's now commit our changes to the repo and push it to Stripe. So git add all, of course, and then git commit message improved Stripe implementation. And then git push Heroku master. And once more, this will take some time, and so I see you when that's done. Alright, and now don't forget to set that new environment variable. So that's Heroku config :set, and then simply copy it from here. Okay, that then restarts the application, and that's it. So let's now actually go ahead and test this. Alright, so we are still here in our application, and let's see which tours Laura has already booked. And so she has the forest hiker, and so that booking was still done using the old method, right? But that old method now no longer works, and so now if we do another booking and it works, well, then that's going to mean that, of course, our new implementation works. So let's test that here. So as always, 4242. And now let's wait for it. And well, that apparently didn't go so well, because otherwise our second new tour should already be here in our bookings. So let's see here in our dashboard. So if we now reload this, then we actually see that there was a successful event. Okay, so that's the event that we just created, and which sent this body here, and then received this response. And so this received set to true is exactly what we did here in our code. So this here, right? So that's the response that we sent, and the body that we got in was all of this data. And so we can see here the session with the price, with the email, with the tour. And so I'm not sure why it didn't work. So let's just quickly reload this here. And so actually our Stripe implementation should be correct, but for some reason our new booking was not created. Let's check that also here in Compass. And indeed, it's not there. So let's go back to our code here. Oh, and one error that I see right away is here. So it should be completed like this. Okay, so that's a stupid mistake. Let's just see if there might be another error up here in create booking checkout. So here we have line items. Let's see if that's correct. And yeah, it seems to be. We can also confirm that here again in our Stripe. No, and actually here it's called display items. So that's weird. So just to make sure, let's also call it display items here in our code right here. Okay. Now another thing that I noticed now as I took another look here is that we still have this image here hard-coded to this other naders.dev. Okay. And so now let's actually fix that because at this point, of course, our website is already live and deployed. And so we can basically replace that with the same as we have here. So we use this part here many times. And so it's time to use it again here. And so, yeah, let's try to redeploy this. So git add all again. And let's just call this here improved Stripe implementation 2. And then push it again to Heroku. Okay, so let's try that one more time. Let's go back here. And now let's try to book again the park camper. All right. You also see the image popping up here on the left side. And so that means that our new image integration also worked just fine. Now it's processing and now it is here. Great, that's beautiful. And so now we really have a secure and way more professional Stripe implementation in our application. So that's great. Of course, if you reload here, then you should see this new event here. So this new call to our webhook, which of course again was successful. So that's just great. Now there's just one final thing that I want to do, which is to basically give the user some feedback in form of one of these green messages that we use also, for example, in the login. Okay. So right now our application doesn't really give any kind of feedback when a new tour was booked. And so now I want to change that. However, doing this is not really straightforward, because remember that these messages are actually displayed by JavaScript. So in the other cases, we did an HTTP call to our API, and then when that was done, we used JavaScript to display some kind of message. But now we do not do it this way, and so the message should already be somewhere in the HTML as soon as the page loads, so that then our JavaScript can pick that message up from the HTML and display it nicely up there in one of these banners. All right. And so the way I'm going to put these alerts in the HTML is once more by using a data property. Okay. So let's start by implementing this feature right there in our main template. All right. And so that's here in views, base. And I will actually add that alert message right onto the body element. Okay. So here we will have a data alert property, which should actually only be set if the alert variable is available here. So let's use ES6 here, so a template string, and say if there is an alert, then use alert here, and else an empty string. Okay? And so this alert here will be the alert message that JavaScript will then pick up and display on the page. Now, how does this alert message then actually end up as an alert variable here in our template? Well, I came up with a solution that is reusable and so that we can use all over our application. And that is that on the query string, we will add some alert keyword, and then we will have a middleware which will take that keyword from the URL, and according to the keyword that we put there, we'll then put a whole alert message on response.locals. So remember that everything that's on response.locals is then available as a variable in all of our templates, right? So we actually used that before in our auth controller, I believe. So very quickly, let me show that to you. So right here, we said response.locals.user and put the current user there. And so then automatically in all templates, we have access to that user variable. Okay? So let's now implement what I just said, and starting with the URL. And so what I'm going to do here is to actually add that query string here to the success URL. So here I will say alert equal booking. Okay? And now I could, in all other URLs, also add some alert, and then with a different keyword here, of course. All right? And we will just do it here really for this booking. But again, I created a kind of reusable solution here. Okay? Anyway, now in our routes, we need basically a middleware which will run for all the requests. And it's that middleware which will pick up the alert from the query string and put a alert message onto our response.locals. All right. So router.use views controller.alerts. Okay. And so this is a middleware function which will basically run for each and every single request that's coming into this router. So basically for all the requests to our website. Okay, and now let's actually create that middleware in our views controller. So exports.alerts, request, response, and next. And so the alert is request.query.alert. And so let's just use the structuring here once more. And then let's say if alert is equals to booking, so the alert that we put right here in the query string, well, then in that case, let's say response.locals.alert will be your booking was successful. Please check your email for a confirmation. And we should also add some other phrase, which is this one. If your booking doesn't so like this, doesn't show up here immediately, please come back later. Okay? And this last part is because Stripe does very specifically say in their documentation that sometimes the webhook is called a little bit after the success URL is called. And so in that case, that success URL would then show all of the current tours, but only after that the webhook would be called and the tour would be created in our database. And so therefore the new booking would not show up right away on the My Bookings page. Okay? But of course everything still worked well in that case, and so a simple reload a bit later will fix that problem. Okay? And now we just need to call the next middleware, and that's actually it. So again, we only did this here for alert equal to booking, but we could now use this all over the place in our website by setting different alert keywords in query strings. So with this, we put this message here onto res.locals.alert. And so again, our base template will then pick that up and display it here into this data alert property. And so all there's left to do now is to go to our index.js and read the alert from here and then display it. And so that should be fairly easy here in public. Let's actually do it right in the index. And the first thing is that we actually need to import the alerts function. And that's not an app, it's here in index. Okay. And then down here, let's basically read that alert. So const alert message, let's say, is document.querySelector, then the body element .dataset.alert. And so only if there is an alert, of course, then show the alert with success and the alert message. And now just one small thing that I want to do is to change a little bit this show alert function here, because we actually have a lot of text now, and the standard time that the alert is shown would not be enough to actually read all the text. So you see here that after 5 seconds, the alert is hidden. Okay? And so let's actually allow the user to specify the amount of seconds that the alert is shown. Okay? And we will do that as a default of 5 seconds. And so here, we then simply do time times 1000 to convert it to milliseconds. Okay? And so like this, all the functions will work everywhere with 5 seconds. Let's actually make it 7 seconds. If we don't specify anything, but if we want, we can then override this 7. And so I will do that now here and actually put it 20 seconds on the screen. All right. So I think that should be it. I hope that made sense. Let's now just very quickly compile our bundle. So that's npm run build, then tab to autocomplete. That takes a little bit of time as well, but now it's done. And so let's now deploy it one last time, hoping that it works actually. So git commit. So Stripe messages. And one last time git push Heroku master. And so let's now test it by buying yet another tour here. So let's get the City Wanderer this time. Oh, and you see that there is a message already here. So that's not good. And you see that it disappeared after 20 seconds. So it seems like now by default it will always put this alert class here. And yeah, that's because here it should be alert message and not just alert. All right. But anyway, let's now just test if the message actually is correct when we book the tour. Okay. And now let's wait for it. Here we go. And indeed, there is our message. So beautiful. Also our tour shows up here. And you see that it really stays here for a lot of time. So that also works. And so let's just very quickly. And first we actually need to rebuild the bundle here. Then we can add everything to our staging area. Message, alert, bug fix. So these are some really professional sounding messages here already. And now one final push to Heroku. So now when we load our page, we should see no alert message. And indeed, now everything is clean. And so I can now say that, at least for now, this project is really finished. So once more, great job, congratulations, and well done for probably being one of the few people who actually are making it all the way to the end of the project and really building this beautiful website and also API that you can now put on your portfolio and show the world.